Hello and welcome to a Glastonbury Romance. And just as such a heifer's up-tossed head and lifted voice might bring some farm girl upon the scene who would pass those paling posts by as if they did not exist, so the suppressed tempest in Nell Zoyland's nerves brought it to her rescue nothing less than the great planet of the evening itself. Whiter than the White Lake stream, whiter even than the girl's face, the celestial luminary, this immortal sign of the heavens, that brings the travelers home by every road, emerged now from the cloudy western lake wherein the sun had vanished. A long relaxed shiver of nervous relief passed through Nell Zoyland's perfect breasts, and through her ravished but unconceiving womb, and through her thighs and through her trembling knees. Turning her gaze from the evening star, she looked, for some reason she could never have explained, not into Sam's pathetic bear eyes that were following her every motion, but into two deep twilight granite pools. Into such granite pools, now that his enemy the sun had long since vanished, Matt Decker's quiet gray eyes under their bristling eyebrows had been transformed. The man met the girl's gaze, and the mysterious sweetness of her soul, troubled still but no longer convulsed with anger, rested for a second upon the priest's new strengths, as if he and not her lover, or her husband, were a true friend among these three men. "Well, you two," repeated Will Zoyland, "aren't you going to answer? I am one for living a civilized life in these things. Could any man make a more liberal offer? If Nell will live again with me, as she did when we were married a couple of years ago, I'll let her see as much of our good Sam as she likes. Will's bed isn't the only place where young blood can cool itself. There's my offer. If you two want to go off together and leave Will to look after himself, go! For God's sakes, go! And good luck to you. I can't hand you the money for expenses because I haven't got it. She knows, none as well as she, that I haven't got it. But if you go, I won't trouble ye. I won't lift a finger to stay ye. Only I won't take Nell back if she gets sick of it. Once gone, always gone is my motto for runaway little girls. Well, sir," and he turned quite definitely to Mr. Decker now, bowing towards him over his gun, "do you feel like treating these frisky lambs to a trip abroad? Or are you prepared to let 'em kiss and clip under our own roofs?" Matt Decker rose slowly to his feet. "May I be allowed a few words alone with Mrs. Zoyland before we talk any more about this?" The bearded man looked, for 1/4 of a second, a little nonplussed, but he quickly recovered himself and waved his hands towards the house. "You go in with him, Nell, if you want to. Can you light the sitting-room lamp, or do you want me to come and do it? You can? Very well, then. Sam and I will stay out of doors. Come and see my otter trap, Sam. It's more likely to catch a water rat than an otter in this little puddle, but you never can tell. Queer if there should be an otter in it tonight, of all nights, but I don't suppose there is." The man went so far in his blustering bonhomie as actually to take Sam by the arms. Sam was so dazed by all these events that he offered no resistance. His mind seemed to have become incapable of any thought or any decision. What waved before him just then was the gasping mouth of the sick minnow at the top of the water in the aquarium in their playroom. He felt like that minnow himself. I don't remember this minnow. "You know, Sam, the truth is, since we've broken the ice," Zoyland's voice went booming on in the darkness by the lad's side, like a low-toned thrashing machine, "our little Nell's not so much in love with you as she is in love with love. She's as romantic as a child of 16. In fact, mentally, I often think she is 16. That's what it is, Sammy, old friend, mentally 16. With no more idea of the realities of life than a schoolgirl. It's a good thing it was a boy like you who came along. With anyone else, she'd have made herself seriously unhappy. But with you, she's safe. That's why I've said to her from the beginning, 'You'll never make me angry with your row over Sam Decker,' I've said. 'With that boy, you're safe,' I've said. And you are safe, aren't you, Sam? He pressed the lad's arms with his free hand as he led him along the bank of the stream. Sam at least had the wit to notice that in his other hand he still held his gun. By degrees Sam became conscious, too, that he did have one clear and strong wish in his confused brain. He wished that William Zoyland did not live where it was possible for him to trap otters. "My father doesn't like the idea of trapping otters," he remarked. After following a kind of towpath along the bank, they came to a small river weir. There was a gurgling sound under the woodwork here, and a low humming and rustling sound. Both sounds were evidently being caused by the position of the dam at that hour, but it was too dark to distinguish them exactly. Out of the darkness of that full-brimmed, swishing water, there emerged a damp, chilly, but not unpleasant smell, composed of many separate elements. It was composed of wet moss, of old dead leaves, of yet older dead wood, of long-submerged, slime-coated masonry, of clammy river weeds. The gurgling sound and the rustling sound came forth hollowly together, producing upon the earth a kindred effect to that produced upon the sense of smell by the damp watcher. The idea of a wild otter caught in a trap by his bearded companion suddenly became unbearable to Sam Decker. For the first time in his life, this much-enduring youth found himself trembling from head to foot with a desire to kill. He imagined to himself the precise nature of that sudden violent shove which would precipitate this burly offspring of the Marquis of P into the rushing blackness. "There may be one of them in it, you know. There may be one of them in it," William Zoyland kept obstinately repeating. Probably nothing would have happened. Probably some other excuse would have presented itself for refraining from a piece of silly violence, but that might not even have proved fatal, for it is likely enough that Zoyland was a powerful swimmer. But the excuse he did obey was the hoot of an owl coming from the direction of the cottage, and 2 or 3 times repeated. Sam answered the owl's cry, imitating it exactly, and the thing was repeated again and again. "He wants us back at your house," Sam said, "so he'd better go. That's my father. That's not an owl." "1 minute, then. You go ahead, Sam. I'll be with you in a moment." But Sam had not waited for the permission from his host and rival. He was already hurrying back in shambling speed and nearly broke into a run. He felt he was escaping, not from the bearded man, but from his own dark impulse. He was surprised to hear strange voices when he neared the house, and as he reached it, as he observed, in the narrow lane behind it, the lights of a motor car. When he entered the little sitting room, he found it pleasantly illuminated by a large, green-shaped lamp to which his host had recently referred, and there were red coals in the grate. Talking eagerly to his father and Nell, and all of them standing in the animated group in the center of the room, were Mr. Philip Crow and Mr. Tom Barter. Sam shook hands awkwardly and mechanically with the newcomers, but all his attention was concentrated upon Nell. Ever since the moment when some mysterious vibration had passed between the girl and the white planet in the western sky, Nell's mood had completely changed. The nervous tension that had been growing week by week ever since she refused Will Zoyland his nightly embraces seemed, at any rate for the present, to have fallen away. In some remote place in her heart, in some hidden chamber there, not far from the spot where she had just now been so grievously wounded by his words, she was, as a matter of fact, experiencing a reaction in his favor. The realization that she could leave him, if only Sam would risk all, satisfied her inordinate mania for romance, while the fact that it was clear that Sam never would risk all helped her reaction towards her husband. Like Helen of Troy upon the high tower of the wall, she permitted Aphrodite to be her guide, and the harlot goddess persuaded her to keep both her men and her lover. Ooh. In Sam's simple brain, it had been lodged as a ghastly and tragic fact that Zoyland's love-making was odious to her. She had been subtly and gradually impelled to lead him on to this sinister view. And she had done it half-consciously, never exactly lying to him, half believing the fancy herself as she yielded to his pathetic and inexperienced advances. Men, especially young men, because of something fastidious and idealistic in their own nature, are always prepared to be touched to the heart by the idea of a girl's physical loathing for another man. Okay. Indeed, it is given to few men, whether old or young, to understand the profound part played by what might be called the universal prostitute in every woman's nature. Just reading what it says here. It is indeed always a puzzle to men, the physical passivity which women have the power of summoning up to endure the inconvenience of an amorous excitement which they do not share. Few men realize the depth of the satisfaction of woman's nature in the mere possession of the power to cause such excitement. When a man sees a sensitive girl with what he considers a thick-skinned, brutal mate, he experiences a twinge, perhaps quite uncalled for, of the sort of imaginative pity which is the inverse side of male sadism. Wow, some real philosophicaling going on there. Whatever passivity it was that Nell Zoyland gave herself up to now, it had become something about it of that mysterious passivity of fate which the women of antiquity knew. And doubtless this mood had been fortified in this case by the girl's talk with Sam's father. Matt Decker had risen to the occasion with a weight and an insight that surprised even himself. To beg her to postpone, to delay, to think, had been his intention when he spoke to Nell. But below his grave and practical words there had been such a clairvoyant tenderness, such a direct man-to-woman, as well as priest-to-daughter vibration in his tone, that her nervous revolt against her dilemma, mounting up to such a pitch of blind anger, and then soothed by the planet of love, ebbed altogether under his influence. What I really came for, Philip Crow was saying, was to see whether there was a chance of Mr. Zoyland helping me out, over at Wookie Hole, as he did last year when I was in difficulties. I know, of course, this was said with a little stiff bow to Nell's direction, that the rumination is nothing to him. But the work is interesting. He found it so last spring, and I'm prepared to pay him a little more than last time. You mean you want Zoyland to act as official guide in Wookie Hole? Threw in Matt Decker. By heavens, Crow, if Zoyland won't do it for you, I believe my Sam here would be just the person. He's read everything there is to be read on Wookie, and he's better up on Neolithic weapons than anyone around here. You'd help, Mr. Crow, wouldn't you, Sam, if Zoyland refused? Sam, abashed by his father's words, threw a humble glance like that of a bewildered horse in the direction of Nell, but uttered no sound at all. William may be pleased to do it, the girl said hurriedly, speaking to Philip but replying to Sam's look. But I think Sam would be just as good a guide in those caves, perhaps better. William's inclined to be flippant and off-handed with people when he doesn't like them, and there must be lots of very teasing people who come to visit Wookie. Philip Crow, whose habit was not to beat about the bush, now looked straight in his business companion. He felt no necessity to appropriate, for any direct purpose of his own, any of these people. And that being the case, his narrow, clear-cut, war-axe consciousness simply eliminated them. I wish you would do it for me, Tom, he said in a hurried, quick voice. I'd far sooner not trouble Mr. Zoyland, or anyone else for that matter at that. And he gave a quick, rather derogatory glance at Sam. I don't know that I could deal with Wookie Hole, Father, murmured Sam nervously. Ooh, Father, did you hear that? What he really felt at that moment was an extreme reluctance to deal with Mr. Philip Crow. Tom Barter surveyed his employer with complete aplomb. He was a shortish, squarish man of clear complexion, with a round, fair, bullet-shaped head. He was the only person under the green-shaded lamp who seemed entirely at ease and carefree. He had been gazing at Nell Zoyland with a shameless glance of covetous, impersonal lechery. Can't leave the office, Phil, he said. You people never know where your own machine is tricky and jumpy. If I left that office, for Wookie Hole, even for a fortnight, it would take 6 weeks to get things straightened out. Philip Crow made a humorous grimace, directed towards Matt Decker. His gesture said, You see what a good subordinate I have, and how prettily he plays the role I've composed for him? At that moment, Will Zoyland came clattering in, boisterous, burly and jovial, and plumbed down the gun against the wall. "No water, Sam," were his first words as he shook hands with his two visitors. "You needn't tell me what you've come for, Crow," was his next remark, "for I see it in your grasping, slave-driving eyes. You want to kidnap poor Will at your damned showman. That's what he's after, isn't it, Nell? Isn't it, Sam?" "Well, Zoyland," snapped Philip sharply, evidently disliking intensely the burly giant's familiar tone. "Will you come out there for a couple of months? I've got a chap from London, an official inquiry, and all that sort of thing for the summer. But people are beginning to come already, and I've got no one there now, but just my ordinary workmen to show 'em around." "Can't answer off the reel like this, Crow. Can't do it." He leaned heavily upon a sort of mahogany sideboard that stood against the wall. 3 silver salvers, bearing the arms of the Makia P, clattered down from their propped-up position, and the whole sideboard groaned under his weight. Philip turned instinctively to Nell. How many times had he not been forced to go what he wanted from a rebellious man by wheedling a practical woman? "By the way, Mrs. Zoyland," he said, "I hope that wild stepbrother of yours hasn't heard about the trouble that started last week among the people at Wookiee. Don't you tell him if he hasn't. The very last thing I want to see is Dave Spear and his fanatical wife down here at this juncture." It was a good thing for Philip at that moment that the suspicious and malicious ears of Cousin John didn't catch the speech. John would certainly have translated these words, that's John Crow, I believe, in the very opposite sense from which they apparently bore. All right, let's stop for now. Maybe we need a cast of characters refresher next time. I'll go back and kind of a lot of things going on now, or maybe not. I don't know. Well, until next time. Cheers from Glastonbury Romance.